22. I'm 85. What happened during my first birth was called normal for 50 years. The blue-rimmed wash basin is under the bed, and I can hear water ticking into it from the rag between my knees. The room is cold, except where the stove breathes against my left side. My fingers are hooked into the edge of a pine chair, the varnish worn smooth where other women held on before me. "Don't make such a fuss," Aunt Miriam says. "She isn't cruel. That's what makes this hard to tell." My husband, Eli, stands by the door, twisting the black button on his coat until the thread turns white. He won't look at me. The midwife folds another towel, slow and neat, and there is a brown stain shaped like Ohio on the wallpaper behind her shoulder. I remember that stain. No, wait. It was more like a boot. Funny, the things the mind keeps. Something is wrong. I know it in my teeth. But no one says my name. No one tells me what is happening. No one asks before hands move, before my knees are pushed wider, before the room fills with the sound of my own breath coming back to me like it belongs to somebody else. The baby cries. Everyone smiles. And I lie there wondering why normal feels like leaving my own body. That's the thing nobody tells you. A whole room can call something ordinary, while one woman learns never to trust herself again. I am 85 years old now. Quick pause. My name is Sarah, and this is Rebecca Amish Home. If these stories stay with you, if they make you feel less alone, subscribe. It's free, and it keeps these stories alive. Tell me in the comments, when did normal first feel wrong to you? And if you want to go further, a super chat or membership that tells me these voices are worth hearing. Now, back to what happened. What happened began long before that room, before the blue-rimmed basin and the towel folded into fourths. In our church district, a woman's body was treated like a field that belonged first to God, then to duty, and only last, if there was anything left, to herself. The older men spoke of submission through the Ausbund and the Ordnung, but nobody ever sat a girl down and said, "Your pain matters." They didn't have to. I learned it when gross Mammy Anna kept peeling apples with her swollen fingers because supper was at 5, and when Cousin Martha came back to Sunday meeting 3 days after losing a baby and passed the hymn books down the bench. Nobody told me. I just knew. A good woman endured quietly, and a good mother was grateful before she was comfortable. That's the thing nobody tells you. I was 18 before I understood where babies came from, but I knew I wasn't supposed to complain while bringing one. The rule lived in the small things. It lived in the way women lowered their voices when a pregnant girl entered the wash house, and in the way a question could make 6 pairs of hands suddenly busy with clothespins. Once, when I was 14, I asked Mama why Aunt Miriam walked bent for months after Samuel was born. Mama snapped a green bean in half and said, "Some roads are harder." Then she dropped both pieces into the yellow bowl with the chipped rim. That was all. I almost asked what road, but her mouth had gone flat, and I knew better. Shame in our house wasn't loud. It was a pause. It was a look held half a second too long. It was hearing that a woman named Esther had troubled thoughts, and then watching everyone stop inviting her to quilting. So I learned to swallow questions before they reached my tongue, and by the time my own belly began to rise, silence felt less like a rule than part of my skin. I married Eli in October of 1959, when the maple by the schoolhouse was red only on one side. I was 19. He was 23. No, 24. I always get that wrong because his birthday came 2 weeks after the wedding. By spring, I was carrying our first child. My sister Lena pulled me behind the smokehouse 3 weeks before my pains began and gave me exactly 12 words. "It hurts, but women do it every day, so you can too." 12. I counted them later while kneading bread, pressing each word into the dough with my knuckles. Aunt Miriam showed me how to fold old flour sacks into pads and told me to keep the kettle full. Mama brought raspberry leaf tea in a jar with a zinc lid. That was my preparation. No one explained what my body would do, what choices I had, or when fear meant something needed to stop. Eli knew even less. He thought the midwife handled everything, the way a farrier handled a lame horse. I trusted Eli because he was gentle in ways nobody praised. He warmed my boots by the stove before winter meeting, and when my father's mare died, he buried her under the pear tree because he knew I couldn't bear to watch the rendering wagon take her. He had a laugh that started in his nose and surprised him every time. I loved him. I think I loved him. I don't know if either of us knew love could include asking hard questions. The night before, he sat at the table sanding a cradle rail with a scrap of paper so worn it felt like cloth. I think it was Thursday. Yes, Thursday, because Mama had sent over bean soup and the fat had made 3 white moons on top. Eli kept rubbing one spot long after it was smooth. Miriam knows what to do, he said. I nodded because I wanted him calm. He nodded because he wanted me calm. Between us sat a whole world neither of us could name. The pains began before dawn with a pull low in my back, small enough that I finished skimming the cream. By noon, the pull had teeth. Aunt Miriam arrived carrying a black leather bag that smelled of camphor and old pennies, and Mama came behind her with clean sheets tied in blue ticking. They moved through the bedroom without asking me where I wanted anything. The washstand went beside the bed. The chair went near the stove. The curtains were pinned shut even though the November light was gray. Lena squeezed my wrist once in the hallway and whispered, "Don't fight it." Then Mama sent her home to mind the younger children. Nobody told me what fighting looked like. Nobody said I could change my position, drink more than a swallow, or ask them to slow down. They gave me a white nightdress with one pearl button missing and braided my hair so tight my temples ached. When the sun disappeared, Aunt Miriam looked at the clock and said, "This one is taking her time." The room narrows around the smallest things. A fly crawls along the inside of the cold window, though it is too late in the year for flies. The lamp chimney has a soot mark like a thumbprint. One bedpost is loose, and each time I grip it, it knocks softly against the wall. Tap, 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 as if someone is waiting outside. I am wearing wool stockings because Mama says bare feet invite a chill, and the seam under my right heel feels thick as rope. Eli stands near the door, with snow melting dark on his shoulders. He keeps tugging the left sleeve of his coat, the same seam, over and over. Outside, a wagon rolls past, iron rims cracking the frozen ruts. Inside, the stove gives off too much heat at my back, while my hands stay cold. Aunt Miriam lays out scissors, cord, soap, and 2 spoons on a folded towel. The spoons frighten me because I don't know why they're there. Aunt Miriam tells me to lie back. I say, "I can't breathe that way," but the words come thin, almost polite. Mama pats my knee through the blanket. "You're doing fine." I am not doing fine. My jaw is shaking so hard my teeth click, and I press my tongue behind them to stop the sound. Eli takes one step toward me, then stops when Miriam lifts her hand. "Best stay there," she says. He obeys. Of course he does. We all do. Another pain rises, and I reach for the chair, but Mama catches my wrist and puts my hand back on the sheet. "Save your strength." I want to ask, save it for what? Instead, I watch Eli's chest move under his shirt, quick and shallow. "Sarah," he says, "just my name. I'm here. I want him close, and I want every person gone." Both feelings are true, and neither one has anywhere to go. Then Aunt Miriam says the baby must be helped. She doesn't explain what she sees. She doesn't tell me what she is about to do. Her hands move, and my whole body pulls away before I can think. Mama presses my shoulders down. Hold still now, I say. Please wait. I know I say it, because the words scrape my throat. Miriam answers, we can't. Another pain comes. The lamp flame jumps. I feel pressure, heat, and a sharp tearing fear that starts in my belly and flashes into my face. I kick one foot free of the blanket. Mama catches my ankle. Eli whispers, is she all right? Nobody answers him. I wanted to pull away and move closer at the same time, to escape my body and crawl back inside it. Miriam tells me to push. I do, she tells me again. I do. And then there is a cry so small and furious that every adult in the room lets out the breath they had been hiding. They place the baby near my shoulder for a moment. His hair is dark and wet, and one ear is folded flat like a little leaf. I touch it with one finger. A boy, Mama says, smiling as though a door has opened. Then they carry him to the washstand while Aunt Miriam stays between my knees. I ask, am I finished? She says, nearly, and that word frightens me more than the spoons did. The room smells of lye soap, hot metal, and something sweet from the chamomile Mama spilled on the stove. Eli looks at the baby, not at me. I don't blame him. I need you to understand that. He is pale as bread dough, and both his hands are pressed flat against his thighs. Later, after they change the sheet, I notice a loose red thread on the quilt. I pull it until 6 tiny stitches open in a row. Nobody stops me. By midnight, the baby is sleeping, and everyone has decided the danger is over. The plain fact is that I had been hurt, and neither Eli nor I understood that I could have been spoken to before anyone touched me. We didn't know a woman could ask what was happening during birth and receive an answer. In our world, the midwife's judgment stood where explanation should have been, and obedience was treated as calm, even when it was only fear with its mouth shut. Aunt Miriam had delivered more than 60 babies by then. She had no formal medical training, no way to check my blood pressure, and no plan for getting me to a doctor except sending a boy on horseback to a telephone 2 miles away. Still, everyone called the birth safe because both the baby and I lived. Eli wasn't cruel. He was told his job was to wait by the door, pray, and stay out of women's work. So he did exactly that, while I learned that survival and safety were not the same thing. I didn't know the words consent, informed choice, pelvic floor, or trauma. I didn't know pain could be eased, that positions could be changed, or that a frightened woman deserved more than hold still. I thought my body had failed because it kept shaking after everyone left. For 3 days, my hands trembled when I lifted the blue enamel cup, and I hid it by drinking with both hands. He wasn't trying to hurt me. That's what makes it worse. None of them were. The silence had been handed down so carefully it looked like wisdom, mother to daughter, midwife to mother, husband to son. 50 years later, a nurse showed me a sentence in a pamphlet. Nothing should be done to you without your understanding and agreement, unless your life is in immediate danger. I read it twice, then once more, and I carried that sentence back to the girl in the cold room, knowing it had arrived half a century too late. For years after that birth, I learned to leave my body before anyone else could make choices for it. I learned to count ceiling boards, to name every jar on the pantry shelf, to press my thumb into the center of my palm until crescent marks turned white. I would fold laundry in my mind while life happened around me. 2 shirts, 3 aprons, 6 diapers, 1 towel with a rust-colored edge. By the time our second child came, I could disappear so neatly, nobody knew I'd gone. I smiled when Mama asked if I was managing. I said, of course. That was the answer women gave. Turns out fine was our district's most popular kind of fiction. At night, I placed the cradle between the bed and the wall so I had a reason to sleep turned away from Eli. He thought I was listening for the baby. Sometimes I was. Sometimes I was just making a fence out of wood and blankets. I learned to move carefully, to keep peace before it was needed. and to never let my face show the first thing I felt. I would wake before Eli and stand barefoot on the cold floorboards until I could feel where my feet ended and the room began. That sounds strange, I know, but I didn't have better words. My body felt like a house people entered without knocking, so each morning I walked through it alone. By our 5th year, I had little rules. Keep the lamp low, ask about chores, never lie still after a hard memory, wash my hands in water as hot as I could bear. Eli noticed the red skin across my knuckles and bought me a tin of salve from Miller's store. He rubbed it in with his thumb while the children slept. I loved him for that. I resented him for not knowing why my hands were raw. Both lived in me at once, and neither canceled the other. At a quilting bee in Lena's kitchen, when I was 27, Martha Yoder dropped her needle and didn't reach for it. That was unusual. Martha could find a pin in hay. She sat with her hands flat on the green wedding quilt and said, "Did you ever feel gone?" Only 4 words. Lena's scissors stopped halfway through a blue square. Aunt Miriam shifted the coffee pot from one burner to another, though both burners were cold. I knew then. Not everything, but enough. I almost said, yes, every time. Instead, I bent under the table and picked up Martha's needle. When I handed it back, her fingers closed around mine for one breath longer than they needed to. Nobody looked at us. That was how women confessed where I came from. Through a grip, a pause, a cup filled to the rim so no one had to carry it across the room. Martha had delivered her 3rd child during a storm when the creek rose over the South Road. Her husband, Amish, held a lantern while the midwife worked, and afterward, Martha couldn't sit upright for weeks. She told Lena only that she had asked them to stop, and the midwife said, "Babies don't wait for fear." 7 words. Lena repeated them to me while we hung sheets one gray Monday, her mouth full of clothespins. When Martha later asked whether she might see a doctor in town, the bishop's wife told her restlessness could make a woman imagine trouble. So Martha rested. She prayed. She made 14 jars of peach butter and brought 2 to the same midwife. That is how silence protects itself. The hurt woman is taught to call her pain doubt, then asked to thank the hands that never explained. 4 months later, Martha was pregnant again, and not one of us asked what she wanted. The nurse's office is painted the color of skim milk, and I am 69 years old when the word finally finds me. I am sitting on the paper-covered table with my stockings rolled inside my shoes, and the paper crackles each time my knees shake. A young nurse named Camille turns a pamphlet toward me. On the left is a plain drawing of a woman's body. On the right, in a blue box, is one word, consent. She taps it with the end of a capped pen and says, "It means you have the right to understand and agree." My hands go cold. Right now, even telling you this, I can feel that cold move from my fingers into my wrists. The clock over the sink clicks too loudly. Camille keeps talking, but the room has narrowed to that blue box. Consent, 6 letters, a word small enough to fit on a page and large enough to split my life in 2. I am not angry at first. I wish I were. Anger would have been warmer. I am sad, so sad that I sit in my car afterward, with the key in my lap, and watch rain gather on the windshield without turning on the wipers. I grieve for the girl with the wool stockings, for the young mother counting jars in her head, for Sarah at 27, handing Martha a needle instead of the truth. And I grieve for Eli too, because he was taught that standing at the door was love. We were both prisoners of the same silence, though my body paid more for it. That's the thing nobody tells you. Learning the word doesn't give you back the years before it. It only opens every locked room at once and shows you what could have been there. Questions, choices, gentleness, a voice that belonged to me. A week later, I tried to explain it to a woman at the public library. Her name was Denise, and she wore a silver bracelet that clicked against the checkout desk. I said, I didn't know I could say no to a person helping me. She looked kind, but puzzled. But you could always say no, she answered. I nodded because I didn't know how to tell her that a word can exist in your language and still be missing from your world. I wasn't chained. No door was locked. I had simply been taught so early that obedience was goodness, that refusal felt like sin before it felt like speech. I went home with 3 books in a paper sack and left them unopened beside the flower bin for 9 days. I stood between 2 worlds then, one that had hurt me without naming the hurt, and one that named it but could not understand why I had stayed quiet. And still, I miss things. I miss the sound of horses before sunrise, the soft stamp and breath from the barn while frost made the pump handle shine. Eli used to whistle one crooked line of Amazing Grace as he forked hay, always the same line because he forgot the rest. I miss bread from the wood stove, the bottom crust dark enough to tap with a fingernail, and Mama brushing it with butter from a chipped white cup. I miss my grandmother's hands when she prayed, the blue veins raised under thin skin, and one flower mark on her thumb she never noticed. Those are gifts, patience with work, the knowledge that food can be love you hold in both hands, the habit of showing up when a neighbor's roof leaks, even before they ask. I am homesick for a place that hurt me. That's true too. The harm was silence dressed as holiness. 5 words. I can say them now without spitting them, because bitterness would make the story smaller than it is. Beauty and harm can live in the same house. Sometimes they eat from the same bowl. I kept the recipes, the quilts, the hymns I hum when I can't sleep. I let go of the rule that pain must be quiet to be worthy. And I do not hate Aunt Miriam. Near the end of her life, she mailed me a birthday card with a pressed violet inside, so flat it had become almost transparent. She wrote, I did what I was taught. I believe her. I also believe being taught a thing does not make it harmless. So now I choose what comes forward with me, and I leave the rest where it belongs, named, mourned, and no longer in charge. If you grew up somewhere your own body was kept from you like something dangerous, I see you. You survived something, and surviving is enough. You are not broken because you froze, obeyed, stayed, or understood it years later. The body often knows before the mind has permission to speak. And sometimes your first act of freedom is not leaving a place. Sometimes it is learning one word and letting that word touch every memory you were told to call normal. There is no proper age for that knowing. I was 69 when consent became real to me, and 85 before I could tell this story without apologizing for it. Late truth is still truth. A late voice is still your own. You may have learned to smile, while every muscle in you asked for distance. Even now, that matters. To the one who is still inside, you are not weak for listening quietly. To the one who left, missing home does not mean you chose wrong. To the one thinking of leaving, you do not have to solve your whole life tonight. To the one lying beside a spouse, and only now realizing why your body goes still, your reaction has a history. To the one who recognized herself a few minutes ago, breathe and put both feet on the floor. You do not owe anyone a fast answer. You may also be the child of someone who never had these words, trying to understand their silence without excusing its cost. There is room for that grief as well. Your own pace still truly matters here. Wherever you are in this, I see you, and you are not alone. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you felt listening to this. Or tell me the sentence that made something in your own life click into place. There is so much more I haven't said yet. I'm just getting started. There are stories I haven't been brave enough to tell, but I'm getting closer. Stay with Rebecca Amish home if you want stories that make room for the truth without throwing away every tender thing that came before it. And to the members and Super Chat family, you're the reason the next story gets told. If you want to be part of that, the door is always open. I spent 50 years thinking the room had decided what was normal. It hadn't. The room was only full of people who had never been given better words. Now we have them. Now we can hand them to each other. Your body was always yours, even before you knew.